Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the Jail Bharo Tehreek, what seems to be the third day of this Tehreek, and what has it achieved for the PTI at this time. Out of the hundreds and thousands of people expected to tender arrest, there are, I think, an additional 80 at this time. What they mean for the overall movement that the PTI says it stands for, whether it's going to be able to achieve that, we'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about, of course, the decision of the Supreme Court that's awaited and likely to happen in the next week or so. The fact that, of course, there are issues as far as the bench is concerned. Overall, what is the perception on this legal issue? We'll be talking about that also. And of course, it's another day of hardcore politics in Pakistan. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Saif Jamshed Baryar, who's a political analyst. Thank you for joining us today. We also have with us right now Barrister Arif Chaudhry, who's a senior lawyer of the Supreme Court. Thank you for joining us. Before I go to Saif Saab, Arif Saab, legally speaking, as far as the issue at this time in front of the court, and the way that the bench also has become an issue overall, how do you look at this development as far as the legality of it is concerned, and of course the fact that the court has unfortunately again in the midst of what should essentially, do you agree, have been issues, political issues that should have been resolved by the politicians among themselves?
Yeah, Maruf, thank you very much. Actually, this was not an issue because, Constitution is very clear. There is no cable to this proposition that, the elections of these provincial assemblies are to be held within 90 days since after dissolution of the same. But if they are not, going to happen, then situation is not constitutional. It is something else. And the matter is that of implementation of constitutional provision. So once you want to avoid it, then naturally all these things are to be taken in some other way. And that's what I look at, with the perspective, and I go back to 97 when, these things were, spoiled because, that the Janta, the party which was in the government at that point in time, and unfortunately, it was again, and Mr. Nawaz Sharif. He didn't want that, the bench should hear, his case. So,
But Arif Saab, is it true
yeah.
that elections, as far as general elections in this country are concerned, they've been delayed on other occasions also? And if you, what was the modus operandi of that happening when they were delayed earlier? Were they delayed subject to agreement?
That is a different story,
But how? As far as the
forbid,
overall.
Yeah, please go ahead.
The election commission decided to delay them, and the political parties agreed. At this time, of course, the election commission is saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they are not, it's not up to them who is going to announce, give a date for the elections. That's an issue at this time, as I understand, in court. And also the fact that there's an issue of capacity at this time as far as the election commission is concerned. Isn't that true?
Yeah, actually, the election commission cannot take any refuge under that excuse because, the capacity, if they say that they are not in a position to, have these elections, then actually their concept of, their very existence, that is at stake because, there is no other thing which is supposed to be done by the election commission, and what is it for is the only thing that they have to hold fair, free and transparent elections in the country whenever it is required. And when there is a constitutional mandate for holding such elections, then there is no, cable to that proposition, and
But
there is
Arif Saab,
nobody,
what
who
happens?
can take this,
I'm just going to interject for a second. What happens if you're, as I understand the practicality of it, where you are at this time, the judiciary has also said that they cannot provide assistance on the actual days. They don't have the officers to for the polling, and as far as the armed forces are concerned, they've also said that they don't have the personnel. So in that kind of an environment, it seems to be, it's a bit of a problem. You agree, right?
There is no problem at all, and nobody can raise any such problem because, as far as the Constitution is concerned, it's very clear that, since after announcement of a date, election commission virtually takes over the governance. And, wherever they ask anybody, everyone is bound to obey the dictates of election commission. And, nobody, in the government or, in the forces or the
Let me
Ministry of Finance or anything, nobody can, because then they are the government. And, actually, what happened in this case, they never announced the date, and it was the governor initially who was supposed, while issuing the notification of dissolution of assembly, to give the dates for the elections, and they failed to do that, and that was because of a very clear
let me, Arif Sab,
purpose.
now
Because
it's
they were
in
not
court.
interested
Anyway,
in
let me
holding
come
the
back to you on that. Ji, Saif Sab, let's talk about the Jail Bharo Tehreek. We've spoken about this before also, but what is your overall assessment of, what it was supposed to achieve? We've spoken about this in the sense that, before subcontinent, we saw these kind of tehreeks happen. But as far as, the achievables of the PTI itself, what do you think? I mean, if 80 people are going to tender arrest and it's not going to fill the jail, certainly, is it, what does it signify for them? If it's symbolic, then, are they supposed to now, why are they going to High Court against those arrests when they've voluntarily surrendered themselves? How do you perceive that situation?
Thank you, Maruf, for taking me here for this particular topic. Well, the very first thing is that the very inception of the Jail Bharo Tehreek, it was to show mass power of political, maybe capital that PTI had. Now, the very inception of the Jail Bharo Tehreek required people maybe in thousands or hundreds of thousands to be taking on to the streets of Lahore, to be taking on to the streets of Islamabad, or to be taking on the streets of Multan. But the real ground level statistics are very much otherwise. The need of the time or the need of the hour was not to simply call for such an indecisive position by Mr. Khan at the moment. It was better to strengthen their own party politics at the very grassroots levels. Now the issue at hand is that given PTI is seeing the Jail Bharo Tehreek as not that momentum gaining as they had believed to be, now they are resorting to maybe the legal apparatus of what the state has to offer. But even today, in this political volatility, in order to gain momentum, PTI needs to decide. There is an opportunity cost right now. There's an opportunity cost that whether they want to continue the container or the street level politics, or they maybe want to rest the entire scenario to the courts of law. Now, my personal political take on this would be, everyone can differ with opinion, but my take would be some things are better left to the maintenance of the constitution of the Republic of Pakistan, rather than leaving them off to the streets. Because mostly we've seen senior political leaders going in metaphorically or going in symbolically, while the common political voter is very much disillusioned right now. So this is what I fundamentally feel is missing as a connection between the top leadership of PTI and the average voter, who's looking up to Khan Saab's every speech every day, and he's left in total disillusion or a
But
dissident.
why did Khan Saab himself, in your opinion, he hasn't tendered resignation? It seems to be, it is being said that it is the opinion of the party that he shouldn't do so. Isn't that itself, somehow a contradiction of the narrative as far as the PTI is concerned?
In fact, Maruk, if we look at the past 3-4 months of the narrative building of PTI, I think there have been several times where maybe the party has talked to Mr. Khan about certain narratives to be established, and those narratives were ultimately brought about a particular U-turn. And maybe the very phrase U-turn politics was quoted after 2018 and 19, when Khan Saab, after every establishment of politics in his own narrative, tried to reverse from it then and there. The issue at hand is that maybe Khan Saab was thinking that the public would take it out to the streets, and that political power would assert on the federal government that now it's the right time to call in the elections. I know that the federal government at the moment, the PDM government, is also trying to maybe avoid elections or maybe trying to prolong the elections from happening. But at the same time, PTI's political roadmap is very much vague at the moment. And I think that if this continues, the average voter who's looking up to Khan Saab for a decisive futuristic roadmap, I think he will turn into a swing voter.
But the fact is that, as far as the one of the questions, I want to go to Arif Saab on this also, but one of the questions that has been raised in court was the dissolution itself lawful? Was it itself, the question of the way that it was done? Of course, it doesn't seem to be, as far as the PTI is concerned, as far as their narrative is concerned, it certainly seems to be about power. When you ask, at the behest of one man, 2 assemblies are dissolved. And, because of that, the elections should be announced. So it seems to be one pressure tactic after the other. I'll come back to you.
Sure.
Arif sir, that's a question that has been raised in court, whether the dissolution itself was lawful or not. Am I right?
Yeah. Maruk, actually, this question is answered by the Constitution itself. And if anybody has, any cable to this question, then the resort is to the National Assembly. Because, it is not a matter of, anybody's discretion, or it's not matter of the court to decide. Because, the Constitution has very clearly and candidly mentioned in Article 112, the assembly, the powers of the chief minister to dissolve assembly. And that there is no question about that, because, no ifs and buts, no qualification is attached to this power. It is unbridled. If anybody doesn't like it, then naturally the court says to go to the, Constitutional Assembly. And this is what, those, who were the authors of this Constitution, or who were the creator, and, who really wanted this country to run under the constitutional mandate. This thing is not only in Pakistan, it is in all the democracies. Because whenever the chief minister finds, or the chief executive of the country feels that things are not being run, smoothly, and there is a problem within the this constitutional framework, things are not working that way.
But Arif Sahab, are things not being done right, or is it about the fact that about bring me back to power? Because, initially, of course, we heard what Imran Khan Sahab said, it was about the march was supposed to be a pressure tactic for the government to call elections. Isn't that true? Then the dissolution was supposed to be a pressure tactic for the government to call for the elections. As it is, like you are saying, that the Constitution talks about 90-day period, the Constitution also talks about, the federal government completing its term. So when we talk about pressure tactics, it's certainly, it's quite clear why this dissolution happened, and why it was, at the behest of one man. You have 2 assemblies. People who were elected for a particular term have gone home so that they can come back and bring him back to power.
Maruk, the problem with me is that I don't hold belief of any political party, particularly, the government or this, PTI. As far as I am concerned, I am a simple man, who has some little, understanding of Constitution, and what I know throughout what is going on in this country. The matter of is an issue is that, whether you have to run this show under the Constitution, or you have to go for extra constitutional measures. If I talk about this, Imran Khan, there was a time when these political parties who are in the government, they were saying that if he is interested in, holding early elections, he should dissolve his assemblies where he is has the power, and the next day we will hold elections. So, and there was a time when he was going to resort to, violence in the Islamabad, and, dharna and other things. And that was the time when they said, instead of going for this, he should go for dissolution of assemblies. And
but Arif sir, what do you think? What do you think this Jail Bharo Tehreek stands for? I know that you're a man of law, and you don't want to talk about politics generally.
Listen, Maruk, listen. Please give me, let me complete my sentence. Jail Bharo Tehreek are dissolution of assembly. The question is that, whether Imran Khan is successful in forcing the government or not. But what about the people of Pakistan who deserve constitutional rule in their country and constitutional demands? That, when
I think the people of Pakistan also deserve leaders who think about the country, who think about the national interest, who think about economy, who think about the fact that, there has to be a deal with the IMF. who think about the kind of issues as far as
Maruf,
inflation is concerned.
everything is
Arif
subject
Sab,
to
who don't
Maruf.
renege on promises made to the fund, you know, that lead to the kind of situation that we are in right
Maruf, how
now.
can no, listen? Now, Maruf, can I ask you? Can I
Arif Sab,
answer the
on that,
question?
let
If
me
it
come
is a
back. Just let me come back to you. Ji, Sir Sab, I think that's a very relevant thing that Arif Sab is saying. He's saying what the people of this country deserve. You know, the people of this country are dealing with, I think, a host of other problems, and Jail Bharo Tehreek is not one of them.
Maruf, let me add a little humor into the debate here. And I think that humor will be much relevant for the average voter out there to understand.
Ji.
Now, when they made the first steamboat in the world, the people on the East Bank said that this steamboat won't go along the river.
Okay.
When it started to go along the river, the people on the West Bank started to say that it won't stop.
Okay.
Now, it went and it stopped as well. Now, unfortunately, in Pakistan's case, the dilemma is very different. There are people on the East Bank having one political narrative. There are people on the West Bank having another political narrative. And these East Bankers and the West Bankers are also having their own legal narratives. And in between, that steam engine is of the economy that's not really running. Now, this is something very important and critical and crucial to understand at the moment. That you're living in times when there's 35% weekly inflation. The average man cannot afford to drink a cup of tea. The average man cannot afford to provide the basic nutritional requirements for his daughter who's school going, let alone the school fees.
Yes.
So at this particular time, a country of 230 million people, I think the East Bankers and the West Bankers honestly need to start that steamboat running rather than anything else. And this is very much metaphoric, very much symbolic, but very much relevant to the realistic street politics that's going on in the country. Now, what is democracy? Democracy is strengthening people with awareness to take the decision of the vote at the grassroots level. Now, how many of the political parties at the moment are actually going to those very grassroots and are addressing the issues that exist? So this is something that I think is very much easy to understand, but yet it is seemingly very different for the political activists and for
Because
the
it seems
political
to be about
parties of this country.
power for
Absolutely.
at PTI, when you talk about the Jail Bharo Tehreek, when you talk about these pressure tactics, which is what essentially they are. Arif Sab, I want to ask you your opinion on what's... Ji, Arif Sab, can you hear me? Ji, Arif
Yeah,
Sab,
yeah,
I want to ask you, as a lawyer of so much experience, what do you think will happen? What do you think is likely to happen in court?
First of all,
Tomorrow.
let me, ask this question from anybody, whosoever may answer. Can we run this show within, while being under the constitution that, this regime, which is caretaker regime, can it exist legally after after 90 days? Because their mandate, according to the constitution, is for 90 days and for holding fair and free elections. So anybody who is talking about East and West, and the opinion of the people, he should be cognizant of the fact that the day we are now living, it is not a time when, people had to think about, are going miles away, people, everyone one knows that, the question is the legitimacy of the regime. Whosoever has to hold power, he has to hold power through the elections. And how can you allow anybody without elections to hold to keep on moving? I don't think that there is a question about the holding of elections about the federal government. Let them stay according to their schedule. But what about those assemblies which have already been dissolved? Irrespective of the fact, yet, what is the question? Even if the question is answered in affirmative and the assemblies are again resurrected.
Right. Okay.
The next day, let me complete one sentence. The next day, the chief minister, again, according to the constitution, he can dissolve the assemblies. So now the matter is that if you have to run this show according to the
I'm saying I don't want to talk
then-
too much
then,
into
yeah,
it because it's sub judice in
yeah.
that sense. But what is your opinion of what will
it is
likely happen
sub judice
tomorrow?
that the answer with the judiciary, I would say Supreme Court, is yes, that the elections are to be held and nobody has the right. Once you allow this happening, for any reason, then maybe there would be no election, because same thing will hold field after 3 or 4 months. That the financial crisis, and the administrative crisis, and
Arif Sab,
blah
what
blah
about,
blah,
I have
everything.
to, I
And
know
then
that you are
east
also
and
short of
west again,
time.
it seems.
Gee, I know that you are also short of time, but one quick question. What, as far as the 32 seats on which by-elections were supposed to be held, there is a decision, there's a stay, as I understand, on the denotification of the Election Commission. But at the same time, there hasn't been any decision on the decision of the Speaker. Could you clarify on that for us? I mean, what does this mean?
Yeah, yeah. It means that this government, the present regime, is not interested in implementation of the Supreme Court or High Court decisions. And even if tomorrow the decision comes that they have to hold elections within 90 days, they are not going to abide by. And
Arif Sab, this is a decision of the High Court.
They are looking for a chaos. But what does it mean? It has not been challenged. Until and unless it is staying there, High Court doesn't mean anything less than
No. Arif
with
Sab,
less
but the
importance,
decision, it's been taken by the High Court. If they've stayed the
why not?
denotification, but they haven't ruled on the decision of the Speaker.
No,
It
but
was
they
for the
have-
court to
they
do
have-
so.
No. They have given a particular decision. No. What do they need to do other than that? They have given a verdict, and that verdict is that the Denotification Act has been suspended, and now they are,
No.
for all practical purposes, as far as court is concerned, they are the members. And how
No,
can
but
the
Arif Sab,
Speaker
they
of the
haven't,
Assembly
as far as the decision of the Speaker
that.
is concerned, they've, as I understand, they've clubbed it with the main petition, which is to be heard on the 7th of March. I'm saying legally,
No,
what does that
doesn't-
mean?
Rather, it is legally, it is once an order is passed, that has to be implemented first. There is no question about clubbing it with the rest of the case, because whatever part, whether it is interim injunction or it is a complete decision of the case, the court.
But Arif Sab, it's
this
a
is
decision of the
new
court.
dimension.
I think,
Yeah,
perhaps you can look at
No,
it
no.
again. I think
This is
there
a
is,
new interpretation. No, this is Maruf, new interpretation. It has never been. Once a court passes an order, an injunctive order, restraining order, refraining order, or status quo, that has to be implemented first, and then the rest of the case. If anybody doesn't comply with that order, he is bound to face consequences under Contempt of Court Act, because the court has to see its order is
fair enough.
implemented.
That's your
How
opinion.
can
Fair
you do
enough.
that?
Thank you.
Yeah, this
Arif
is
Sab,
again-
thank you for your
this is my
time. Thank
opinion,
you
and
for
that's-
making it. Thank you for joining us today. We want to go back and, Saif Sab, I know that Arif Sab has his own opinion, but the fact remains, as far as those 32 seats are concerned, even though there is a stay as far as on those denotification, as I understand, there isn't a question on the Speaker decision. We don't know what's happening. So I think there are these issues at this time that are not very clear. And we are acting, of course, as far as issues like elections are concerned, as far as these issues of going back to the assembly, first resigning from the assembly, like you said. When we talk about U-turns, one of the main U-turns was also this.
Absolutely.
It's about one man and his ego. When he says that all his people should stand and resign, and they resign, it's about one man and his ego. When he decides that both the provinces assemblies should be dissolved, and now that he should be brought back in power. Isn't that true?
Maruk, I think you must have heard that statement that says my way or the highway. So it's more a situation of my way or the highway at the moment. Now, had the political party called PTI been so sure of the political momentum that they had maybe 6-7 months ago, the fact of the matter was that they had to retain that political momentum through political means. Now, trying to at first categorically dissolve certain assemblies, then trying to maybe having this idea of the judiciary backing you up, and ultimately then even contesting the verdict or the decision that is still to be arrived, then trying to contest the premise of the bench before that. I think this is only to create a certain more confusion in the average voter out there, because we're truly living in the age of misinformation more than information. And if you look at the average spectrums of information that are established in the average person today, they are probably established through digital media. They are established through digital platforms. Now, the issue of importance over here is that rather sticking to what the law says, like Chaudhary Saab said, and I really respect him for all that he knows about the law, but there is this particular constitution that even says that in times where there is financial crisis in the country, the president can in fact provide interference to delay the elections. Now that's the very constitution as well.
That's what I'm saying, and there have been instances where the elections have been delayed.
Yes, even last time I told you that the elections of 88 were delayed, the elections of Mohtarama Benazir Bhutto's death, the elections that followed after, they were delayed. And there have been many other times as well. There have been 3 times in recent history.
But it didn't become a question for the constitution at the time.
It didn't become a question because ultimately, if we look about the idea of law, law is something that is not based on subjective opinions. It is based on the objective realities. And the biggest objective reality is what we drafted back in 1973.
Exactly.
So sticking on to those objective realities, there are past precedents as well. Now, if you look at those precedents with transparency, I think that 2023, nonetheless, regardless, is the elections year already. This is something that I know, this is something that you know.
When people talk about the constitution, they do not perceive the reality of where we are economically.
True.
And the fact that are we going to have these elections, piecemeal elections, and we compare it to India,
True.
when they are, you know what, the 4th, 5th biggest economy in the world?
Absolutely.
How can we compare ourselves to our neighbor, you know, when economically we are nowhere? You know, as far as our own standing is concerned, our inflation, people, floods, there's so much else that has to be taken in perspective. And I think it's a question for the court also.
I'll take you back maybe in recent times when there was severe flooding. Pakistan emits about 0.8% carbon emissions in the world, and yet again it was the 4th worst country to get hit by floods. The immediate losses economically that were projected were almost $3 to $4 billion, and the realistic estimates today stand at $52 billion. $52 billion wiped off from the economy, $3.09 billion in your reserve, average percentage of inflation at 35%, and then again the average voter or the average Pakistani is sitting 24/7 in front of television channels to know the fate of his vote. This is the unfortunate reality of this country, that every time when democracy was to follow, it ultimately got very much manipulated by the subjective opinions of these political parties than the objective realities of the greatest book in this country, that is the Constitution of '73.
Exactly, and you know, when we talk about the constitution, we talk about rule of law, one of those, like you are saying, those things have to be taken in perspective, and I think it's a question for the courts, yes.
Absolutely.
But we expect that the courts are going to be able to, you know, of course, look at all these realities also. I don't want to, you know, delve too much into the legal question of it, because certainly it is one of those issues that is, you know, in court at the time and sub judice, and so I don't want to. But I want to move on and talk about what the PMLN feels about the elections. Of course, we've had statements from Mariam Nawaz herself and from, you know, their new leaders, the Minister for Interior also saying categorically that they are themselves ready for the elections, and that they are not a party that will shy away from elections under any pretext. Whatever the court decide and whatever the court decides and the Election Commission decides, and the governor's purview is. We have with us Bilal Kiani, who is a coordinator to PM on Economy and Energy. He's also Assistant Secretary General PMLN. Thank you for being with us. Bilal sir, that question is for you as far as the elections are concerned. Of course, your party maintains you're ready for them. But you know, there's a perception at this time, because of this decision that's pending, that the government doesn't want elections. How would you answer that?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Firstly, thank you for having me on your show. I mean, the simple answer is that that just isn't simply true.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that the government has nothing to do with the determination of the election date.
Okay.
As far as the party is concerned, as far as PMLN is concerned, we will contest elections whenever they are held, and that's not a decision that the PMLN gets to make or wants to make. As you said, that the matter is sub judice. It is in the Supreme Court. Prior to that, it was in the Lahore High Court. The parties to the case were the Election Commission and the governor. And now we've got another hearing tomorrow. The PMLN, as well as People's Party and JUI, have certain reservations regarding the the
yes, I want
composition
to
of
come
the,
to that.
the composition of the bench.
Hmm.
But apart from that, I mean, whenever elections are held,
Hmm.
PMLN will contest as we've always done.
What do you feel as far as the constitution of the bench is concerned? Do you think, are you going to be, of course, like you said, you have expressed reservations with the bench, but regardless of how it goes, the PMLN will accept whatever comes your way from the court?
See, let's see how the proceedings, you know, how they proceed, or how the case proceeds in the coming days. You know, it's not just the political parties. It's not just People's Party or PMLN or JUI which has raised reservations. Multiple bar councils have done the same.
Okay.
The Sindh High Court bar yesterday raised the same, not just regarding the inclusion of certain judges whose minds have already sort of been disclosed, or whose views seem predetermined, and also for other factors. But in addition to that, the absence of 2 senior judges as well. So you know, and this is a view that seems to be shared not just by these 3 political parties, but across the board. And I think it is extremely important to address these in order to ensure that transparency is ensured in such an important case. You know, any perception of lack of transparency or of undue bias, I think will be detrimental to the state of democracy in the
It's
country.
an important case. It's certainly going to be a huge precedent for the future also, for the elections also. But as far as your party at this time is concerned, pursuant to Mariam Nawaz's return, her reorganization of the party also, overall, what is, you know, there are reports that Mia Saab himself will also return before the elections. You know, would you have an answer to that also? And do you think overall, as far as you know, the reorganization is concerned, things have, you know, changed since her return as far as Mariam Nawaz herself is concerned?
So to answer your question about Mr. Muhammad Nawaz Sharif, he will return as soon as possible. And you know, as a former 3-time Prime Minister, I mean, it's his, and given the sort of victimization he has gone through, it is perfectly up to him, totally up to him, to decide when he feels it is best to return. There are multiple considerations involved, primarily the state of his health. And so yes, inshallah, he will return to Pakistan soon. As far as your question about Mariam Nawaz Sahiba's new designation, a new appointment in the party is concerned, and the impact that's had, I mean, yes, I definitely feel that it's made a significant impact in a very short space of time. I am accompanying her on all the visits. So as you may be aware, ever since she's returned to Pakistan, there was a program that was decided for her to visit all our divisional headquarters for organizational visits. Those are still ongoing. Every 3rd or 4th day, we're in a different divisional headquarter.
Would you say that you're already in electioneering mode?
I wouldn't say that. The primary purpose of this particular exercise is purely organizational, where she's going to each divisional headquarter, and the program includes an organizational convention where we get our office bearers and she addresses them. In addition to that, we have meetings with our ticket holders from that division, with our office bearers from that division, with the various wings, whether it's a women wing or youth wing or the social media team, etc. So she's really, you know, it's a chance for our party office bearers and ticket holders in that area to have a very threadbare discussion with her, and for her to learn more about the situation on the ground. So yeah, it's part of the fact that, you know, she's devoting a lot of time in order to understand the issues, in order to address them. So it's just part of that exercise, and this will continue in the coming days and weeks.
Bilal sir,
and I would add, sorry, with your permission, that it's made a huge impact, because you see, we are a very large party, and the workers and our candidates, etc. They all want time with leadership in order to be able to share their grievances or to share their observations or their suggestions. So she's really devoting a lot of time to this exercise, and it's certainly you know, helping in mobilizing and strengthening our party.
Bilal sir, your narrative as far as the PMLN is concerned is, you know, there is time and again a lot of abusive discourse that unfortunately comes from the other side. You know, there's no secret that it is said again and again, things are said, things are alluded to. It has become, unfortunately, a part of the political discourse from the PTI. As far as the PMLN is concerned, how would you, you know, do you think that PMLN has managed to deflect it without resorting to it? What is your overall opinion? Because politics is certainly not the same that it was perhaps even 10 years ago, thanks to, at this time, a political opponent that you have in the shape of an opposition that resorts to everything.
Yeah, you're right, and he seems to be a part of a trend that seems to be making waves across the world. I mean, this is like right-wing populism, or so he's just he's lowered the standards of decency or of the traditions or the culture that we've had in our politics. I mean, and that's not to say that the state of democracy here has been perfect or things have always been great before him, but the fact is that he's certainly lowered the standard of discussion. He's certainly increased, he's certainly encouraged hatred, encouraged abuse in political discourse. But you see, we
what
as a party.
What is the PMLN's answer to this?
Well, our answer is to continue to do what we've always done, which is to ensure that respect and dignity is ensured, to ensure that we carry on our political actions and our discourse and our way of discussion in the same way that we've always done, and ensuring decency. You can't fight hatred with hatred, you have to fight hatred with love. And so we continue to play our part in countering Imran Khan's divisive politics by encouraging people to come together, even if there are differences of political opinion. We feel that our role as the mother party of the country is to ensure that even those people who may not have politically agree with us, that we try to bring them on board and bring people closer together, rather than further fuel the fire that of divisiveness and hatred that Imran Khan has been fueling.
Bilal sir, we're running out of time, but you're also the coordinator to PM on economy and energy. And of course, one of the huge questions at this time for this government is economy, is, going back to the fund, is trying to convince them, is trying to getting back on the fund. How far are we on those issues? How far are we on clamping down on inflation? How far are we on trying to make things better for the common man?
So as far as the IMF negotiation is concerned, as you know, the current government revived a program that was stalled by the PTI government at a time when reserves were low, and so pretty much we were pushed into a situation of near default by the PTI government. So that's the environment in which the current government assumed power. And after that, after very difficult negotiations, after bridging the trust gap, the program was revived, and that effort at that time was again sabotaged by the PTI government. Nonetheless, we are where we are now, and we've had floods in between, which have also complicated the process, because the plan we had agreed, we had to review it in light of the efforts that needed to be made for flood relief. Recently, as you know, on the 9th of Feb, the IMF mission departed from Pakistan after 9 to 10 days of discussions, and most of the things, or everything actually, was agreed in principle, and it was a case of fleshing out the details, a few kinks that needed to be ironed out. So in order to that end, virtual discussions have been ongoing, and I think there are a few minor things left. Once those are resolved, I think you will see the announcement of the staff level agreement very soon.
Saif Sab, I had to go to Bilal Sab, he joined us now, but overall, what is your perception of how things are going to be? Of course, like I said, the challenge is economy. Regardless of what the court holds, I think people are looking at, what the overall situation is going to be economically. Am I right?
Maruk, absolutely. I think if you look at maybe political narratives over digital media, that's a different reality altogether. If you go out at the streets, the average person walking out there is more cautious about whether he'll be having something to eat the next day or not. The average person out there can maybe delay his vote at the moment. And I'll build upon Bilal Saab's argument that the average voter out there is more cautious about what economic certainty can be blended into his and his family's life as of the moment. And unfortunately, the dilemma of this country is that today, rather than talking about the economy, rather than maybe talking about how our foreign minister defended our foreign stance in front of the world just last week, today we are contesting a decision by the Honorable Supreme Court that is yet to arrive. And this many a times has happened before as well. So unfortunately, I think that at times, politics of infatuation, politics of hype, or I'd rather say politics of populism is far more detrimental to any young democracy than incremental.
Exactly.
This is my stance.
I want to,
on it.
Bilal sir, I've asked this question, but I need an answer from someone from the PMLN, that as far as the situation at this time is concerned, the government has not made any secret of the difficulties they're facing. Whether you talk about Ishaq Dar Saab, you talk about Minister for Interior, anybody, overall, Maryam Nawaz herself says that she's cognizant of the difficulties that the common man faces. She feels it, her father feels it. Mian Nawaz Sharif himself knows what the common man is going through. But you have a former prime minister in this country at this time who seems to be, the pressure tactics starting from the march and then the dissolution of assemblies and now the demand for the elections, all of those things have continued to get himself back to power. What do you think they expect? Were they even to succeed? Is it going to be easy for them? Are they going to be able to, do anything for this country at all? What is your overall feeling about this?
I think Imran Khan's thoughts don't go beyond his lust for power and to just sit in the seat.
Okay.
And unfortunately, him and his party seem to be willing to go to any length for that purpose. We've seen that with the way they deliberately sabotaged their own IMF program when they realized that they're no longer going to remain in power. We saw that when they used a lie such as the cipher in order to do something as serious as dissolving the National Assembly. We've seen this time and time again. And so, even right now, even today when Imran Khan speaks, his whole politics, his entire narrative is centered around hatred for Nawaz Sharif and PMLN and his political opponents. When you hear him speak right now, you will never know that this man sat in the seat of the Prime Minister for 4 years. He never speaks about his performance. That's not his priority. I mean, even though
perhaps also not the strong point for them to talk about.
But yeah, but you expect. I mean, it's as if he has never really gotten off the container. Neither when he was in office, nor after it, nor before. It's just the only thing he knows is to constantly spew hatred and abuse his opponents and constantly fuel the fire of hatred and get his rile up with the electorate against certain people. He feels that this is his only way to political success. That's unfortunate, and we will continue to do our work to counter that.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being with us. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Saif Jamshed Saab, thank you for joining us. Bilal Kiani, thank you for being with us. Barrister Arif Chaudhry, thank you for joining us today. Of course, overall, what happens in court, we'll know in the next week or so. But of course, at this time, the difficulties are economy, the difficulties are trying to deal with the security situation, a multitude of issues that the government at this time is grappling with. And those realities, unfortunately, will not subside in this rhetoric, whether it's Jail Bharo Tehreek, where 80 people tender their voluntary arrest, and then go to court after saying hundreds and thousands will follow. Inherent contradiction in terms that has also been exposed as far as the opposition is concerned. Of course, let's see what happens in the next week or so. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.